Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to the Raptors Weekly Podcast. I'm your host, Samson Folk, and today a group chat type thing, I guess. I haven't really done this. I don't think anybody's really done this on the Raptors Republic channel since S and his joke / basketball whose take is it anyways show that he used to do, which was great. He's now moved on to doing other things, of course, but we're talking about draft guys, people that the Raptors might target, and wishful thinking for really high-level players to fall, maybe some underrated guys that we can look at, and we'll be talking about their skills, how they might fit with the Raptors. And with me today is Nabeel, Trayvon Heath, and Goose. And so you might recognize them from Twitter. All of them dabble in the Raptors. All of them dabble in draft takes. And if I can give you a background, Hoop Goose has been on this. Well, actually, everybody's been on this podcast before. So if you're a very faithful listener, hopefully you recognize them. But if I can give you a background, Hoop Goose is down in the bottom right corner currently. Oh. Let me just stretch this out so it's everybody equal. There we go. Everybody nice and tight. But I tell you this, they all watch NCAA. They all watch a little bit of Europe. They all watch a little bit of high school. They care about hoops. And this manifests in fandom and in analysis. And we're here to get after it. So the first thing I want to ask, actually, is I'm going to go to you, Goose. Who is your ideal Raptors draft pick at 33? And you choose whoever you want, really.
Blake Wesley from Notre Dame. Yeah.
What's the reasoning there?
Okay, the quick pitch is that he's like just a shooting guard with great tools. It's like long, athletic, really quick off the bounce. He's able to create his own shot. And I really like what he can do defensively. Right now, his game is more pieces than like a whole, but I think once you put it together, you have something that fits really well with the Raptors.
Okay. Nabeel, Trayvon, do you guys have any thoughts on Blake Wesley?
I like Blake Wesley a lot. It's not a very Raptors-y pick, I will say, just because he's not 6'9". But he does have like a large plus wingspan. He gets to the rim a lot, and he's shown that he can be a playmaker in certain situations. So I don't see it being a bad pick, especially like how weak the Raptors are, especially in their guard depth.
Okay, Nabeel, any thoughts on Mr. Wesley?
Yeah, not to compare these two guys, but it kind of reminds me a bit of like the Terquavion Smith pick in the sense that like this is a really young guard that has, really nice physical tools and has some upside. And I think there are certain aspects of his game where like he potentially not contribute immediately, but could be effective for the Raptors. But yeah, no, like similar to what Goose and Trey said, Blake Wesley is a really, really intriguing guard prospect. And if he does fall to 33, I mean, it'd be incredible.
No, I just like the Terquavion comp because they're very similar, but I think Wesley is just better. So anybody who liked Turk, I think they would like Wesley too.
And sticking with you, Nabeel, who's your ideal guy at number 33?
All right. Ontario, I think Mississauga, Ontario's very own Caleb Houstan would be my pick at 33. Played on a stack team at Montverde, played at Michigan, 6'8", 6'10" wingspan, I believe, something like that. Really long shooter, has a lot of movement shooter upside. Obviously, he had an inconsistent season at Michigan and probably didn't shoot the ball as well as people wanted to or what people expected. But I think at 6'8", with his shooting ability, especially in today's NBA, you look at guys like Cam Johnson, Duncan Robinson, that have recently come into the NBA that had size and had not exact shooting ability, but comparable at least shooting ability. I think it's a nice bet to take. And he's young. Those guys came into the league much older. I think Cam Johnson was like 22, 23. I think Duncan Robinson was also older. Caleb Houston's still only 19 years old, I believe. So yeah, youth, size, shooting in the second round, I'll take that upside.
So when we think about movement shooters and how they've kind of been mitigated in playoff series in the past, and not every team is able to do this, but a lot of the high-level ones can kind of shake up how they approach, how they're attacking perimeter actions. What are your thoughts of his skill set translating to being able to counter that kind of stuff?
I don't think he's an excellent movement shooter right now. I think obviously he showed a lot of flashes and potential for it, but I don't think it's like a consistent part of his game just yet, especially, being able to shoot the ball consistently off of movement. But In terms of things he could bring to the game where, obviously we've seen the playoffs, movement shooters are people who are sort of like one-dimensional shooters, get schemed a lot. That's where I think he kind of sets himself apart from the pack. Again, Michigan was tough. He didn't get to show a lot. It was kind of an inconsistent up and down season. But if you take sort of what you've seen at the high school level and then his FIBA tape, especially at the U19 level, there's a lot of flashes he showed, both, with the ball and without the ball, making plays, being able to, make reads and make those, dump off passes or secondary passes and show some secondary playmaking chops. And then also just being able to, lead the break and be somewhat of a pull-up threat. And again, he did that more at the U19 level. But Robel actually, I think, was on PD Web. I think he was on his Twitch stream, like almost.
Let's watch film.
Yeah, let's watch film almost a year ago. And he had a great breakdown on it, just like looking at tape of him playing in the U19 and seeing that ability to not only shoot but also do some more things with the ball, create for himself a little bit for others, and shoot off the dribble and things like that. So yeah, I think that those things all in conjunction would be things I'd bet on in terms of upside, where as he develops, he will be able to counter teams top walking him and preventing those wide pin downs or coming off DHOs or stuff like that.
That's probably Robel's last public works before he went to draft Twitter in the sky, i.e. NBA work. Goose, Trey, do either of you have thoughts on Houstan?
I don't know if I would draft him with the movement shooting in mind, because I don't know if I've seen him do it that much, especially in college, where he was mostly just kind of more stationary shooting. And I think that's maybe it's something that you can find out more in a workout type thing, where you kind of run him through those drills and stuff. But I don't know if that's really his main appeal. But I do think you didn't really talk about his defense, which I think is a plus.
Yeah, that's my fault. That's the limitation of my asking about movement shooting. What else are you looking for from Houstan?
I think it was less I think the pitch for him is less Duncan Robinson and more like Danny Green. Just he's not as this pull out all the stops offensive weapon thing, but he's a reliable shooter, and then just defensively he's somebody who's always in the right spot. I don't know if he's as good as Danny on that end, but he is bigger. And this is the second round. We're not gonna get flawless prospects either. So it's kind of
not one of the best 3-and-D wings of the past decade.
Yeah, I think Danny is kind of underrated, but now we're going off topic. So
Trey, any Houstan thoughts?
I'm a truther. I would love that pick. I think the cool thing about Caleb is his role in high school is probably what he's going to be doing in the NBA. And I think that's really applicable here. Whereas in Montverde, he was playing with a bunch of guys who can create, guys who can get downhill and pass, with Scotty, Moses, and Cade, obviously. And he showed that he can shoot, play his role, and defend at a plus level. He fits our long, lanky situation that we're trying to really do. And I think he has some upside as a passer. He has some struggles getting downhill, but when he's able to create separation or come off a pin down, he's been able to make the right decision and find a big at times. So I'd be pretty happy with that pick.
Does anybody have any idea or thoughts on how he might fit in next to the current Raptors situation? Thad and Boucher are technically up in the air, but a lot of the roster is set for, lack of a better term. And so is there situations that you've seen other players succeed on the Raptors in that you think Houstan could just plug in as? And anybody feel free to take this one.
I would say he would probably fit the role that the Raptors probably imagined for Yuta, where wing shooter that it crashes the boards just like the bigs, who can defend versatile fours, defend some wings at times, and it gives us probably a bit more scheme flexibility just because we have more players that can guard actual wings. So I wouldn't mind it. I think he actually would be able to play pretty much right away.
I was gonna say that too. Yuta, but his 3 is actually going.
What's to go back to you, Nabeel, since this is your suggestion, and we've glazed over the defense to some effect, but when we think about fitting into the Raptors scheme, is this a guy who you think, like, is he going to be sliding down to play big and rotate towards the rim, or is he typically going to be fitting in? Like, there's a place that you can exist between Pascal and Fred on the roster, but there's also, if you're one of the three biggest guys on the floor for the Raptors at any point in time, you probably are rotating towards the rim. So what are the expectations defensively, maybe?
I haven't watched a ton of his defensive tape, but Goose brings up a good point. He's probably not, the greatest one-on-one defender at this stage, but I think he's a pretty solid positional team defense guy. Now, as far as the Raptors go, that's the one concern I think I do have a little bit. Obviously the Raptors really want to help at the nail and send a bunch of guys over and scramble a lot, being able to X out and hit all your rotations cleanly. I see him, I don't know if he'll go directly towards the rim, but it's more like the low man, where he kind of like sinks down as the ball goes to like the wing in the corner, and then he'll be the guy sort of like Xing out towards the wing and sort of, operating on the weak side and rotating there if he is to fit in. But I do think, just kind of like what we've come to know with Nick Nurse and his defensive schemes, it might be tough for him to grasp that at first. So I wouldn't expect him to play immediately. Honestly, my whole thing with, and Goose mentioned this as well, the movement shooting is more of like a bet on his upside, and the flash is materializing. Yeah. He's definitely a catch and shoot guy first and foremost. And I think if he was to get any minutes, it'd be there. But yeah, defensively, I don't know if he'll, I don't see him sort of being able to help at the rim or rotating down there more, but more as like the low guy.
And one last question on Houston, if anybody, so stationary shooting, does that extend to being able to like pump, pound, dribble, hit, pump, pound, dribble, take a step in, like all these, and then make like a read? Or is this basically, we're thinking of Shane Battier in 2012 or something like that?
A little bit of the JJ Redick, where you have the sidestep, you have sort of the dribble out in front of you to create more space as defenders are running at you, maybe, stepping in for some mid ranges. I think he does have that, and he has flashed that quite a bit. But again, I think, it won't be so much off movement, right? Like you said, it'll be off, stationary catch and shoot type of stuff. So yeah, I think he does have a bit of a repertoire right now and some dribble moves to be able to, make some effective counters. But those things are all a work in progress at this stage, I would think.
Any Caleb Houstan parting shots for anybody that you think we might have missed?
I think we covered it pretty well.
Yeah.
Sure. Then Trey, who's your guy at 33?
The guy that will make me shed a tear if we select him. Jaylin Williams from Arkansas.
Yes.
There we go.
I think what we've seen like through the last like few years of the playoffs, that there was like an overcorrection on these bigs that are super switchable, that are guarding wings, like a Bam, for example, or Anthony Davis. That guys like Al Horford, Brook Lopez have been super impactful in a drop defense, being good positional defenders and affecting the game. I think Jaylin Williams is a playoff top type player. He's a great passer, good post defender. He's shown that he can be somewhat scheme versatile. They mostly play drop in Arkansas, but he was a very good defender, and he draws charges. It's probably his best skill out of everything is that he draws charges at a very high rate, and he's, although not the athletic rim protector that we typically see, he generates a decent amount of blocks just simply being in the right position, and this would probably help the Raptors. One thing I think we've all seen over the last couple of years is that the Luka types, the Trae Young types, the guys that are able to pass guys open, make multi-read passes against the Raptors, really sprinting at the nail and trying to disturb those passers, gets killed very often. I think with Jaylin, we'll be able to play a bit more drop and still be okay offensively because he's able to pass and actually generate some looks for people like a Marcus. I'm not saying he's as good as him, obviously, but in a similar fashion.
This is what Evan talked about, and we had probably like a 30-minute conversation on Jaylin, and he seemed encouraged by being able to drop at the NBA level. he was questioning the scheme versatility a little bit, but he also he really liked the passing, and I think it's 70 charges he took over his collegiate career, like 1.1 blocks per game. That's a really unique. Just like if you were in a data set query, like who gets this many charges and this many blocks, probably it would only return Jaylin Williams. So the passing and stuff like that, not Marcus Saul, but they run delay action, they run like split action and short rolling with guys like Thad in particular, and some with Scotty, like those dribble handoff sets and keeper plays and stuff like that. What are your thoughts on Jaylin as far as operating in that sense along with the Raptors?
I think we already saw like the impact Thad had in that position, finding Pascal, giving Scotty great looks. Scotty's a great cutter. So I think Jaylin would be able to come in bench lineups, particularly towards the end of the year, Scotty was leading a lot of those bench lineups, and provide looks where we can get actual guys downhill. Because the one thing the Raptors really struggle is finding easy looks. We see Pascal having to do 2-3 moves to get to the actual paint. Fred is taking 40-foot bombs. One of the things we missed probably from that 2019 team is just someone that is at the nail, is drawing some sort of attention if he gets a switch on a small and is able to pass and be able to find people for easy looks.
Goose, when we think about Jaylin Williams, and I know you like Jaylin Williams a lot, so I'm curious what you think about this, but if he's going to succeed defensively, it's probably going to feature drop at the NBA. Maybe some other things too, but how much faith do you have in Nick Nurse to feature him as a drop defender as a young player on a rookie scale contract? Because Kem did play drop for the Raptors. They played quite a bit of drop with Kem this year, but that wasn't their most potent defensive lineup. So I'm curious what you think about Jaylin dictating that the Raptors do a bit of change of scheme, maybe even just as a change of pace.
I think that he would get a chance at least, because I think that Nick really likes to mix up the schemes, you know? I don't think that he would be like, oh, so we're never playing drop, or okay, we're putting Jaylin in, we're going to play some drop. He's going to run a little bit of offense on the other end, you know, draw some charges. And I think there's a really interesting conversation you can have about Jaylin and rim protection and what rim protection actually is in terms of just like preventing guys from scoring at the rim, or not just like blocks and, you know, stuff like that.
Okay. What is rim protection to you?
I think at the most basic is just like preventing someone from scoring at the rim. Or it doesn't even have to be preventing, really. Like I think Mark is a good example when he was here, where he averaged like, I think, less than a block a game, but he was always in front of the rim, and he always made it tough to score. Like you had to score either through him or above him. So even though players I think statistically they shot okay with Mark there, it was more of like, okay, well, we can't really attempt a shot because Mark's right in front of the rim. I think with Jaylin, you'll have something similar where, okay, well, Jaylin either draw a charge or he'll be in the right spot where, okay, this guy can't come up and like throw a layup or whatever, which maybe you can say that you kind of already have that with Precious, but I think it's an interesting conversation, because I think adding drop to the toolkit is a good thing.
And Nabeel, what are your thoughts on Jaylin Williams? Not of Auburn, but of Arkansas.
I just heard Trey talk about charges, and I'm like, damn, Kyle Lowry propaganda and anti-Nate Duncan propaganda in one swoop? My God.
And anti-Mark Schindler propaganda, too. Yes. Another famous enemy of the charge.
Charges are cool.
There we go.
I don't know about it. Like, so we're friends with the creator of the ethical hoops term, but is a charge ethical from a big man perspective? Because I consider it ethical for a small guy to take a charge, because what other means do you have to protect the rim? But when bigs start taking charges like Ersan Ilyasova, it starts to look like a scam. So yeah, but hey, we've had scammers on the team before. I'd accept a prolific scammer again.
What Jaylin does is not ethical. He is very shameless about it. It's not even like just under the rim. Like he'll draw charges on the wing and just like even in transition and everything. So it's not ethical at all.
He's a pass and crash charge taker too. Like it's not just on shot attempts. Yeah. He's sliding under the passer and stuff like that. So yeah. Any Jaylin? Well, actually, is anybody here high on Jaylin Williams turning his jumper into something?
I think I don't think he's going to be like a great shooter just based off what we've seen. But I think the thing that does get underrated with him is his ability to just like move on offense. Like he's not as static as like comparisons as like Mark would have you be offensively. Like he's a guy that can be in the corner, take one dribble, and like have like a fluidish layup. Like I think his offensive upside is kind of being undersold with he's just a passer type stuff.
He has good touch.
Yeah,
I think
he
he could have. I think he could
he
have a
has
push
he has
shot.
a floater game too.
Yeah, Florida gang.
And yeah, go ahead, Nabeel.
No, I just wanted to ask. You guys have definitely watched more Jaylin Williams than I have, but from the stuff I have seen, what do you guys think of like some version of like Joakim Noah as a comp for him?
Well, we know what I think about comps.
Yes, this isn't the show for comps, but I think Old Man Horford is like the closest I've seen of getting close to what an optimistic version of his play style would be.
Interesting. I think we also seals on offense is an underrated thing for a big to do. Guys who are constantly putting guys on their back as they move through the interior, just in case a drive comes, in case somebody else cuts and drags somebody away, or a lane opens up to the rim or anything like that. And as far as like clearing out his own space, not only as a guy who's going to seal for position, Trey alluded to getting a mismatch and being able to score at times, but also getting after it on the offensive glass. Is anybody interested in promoting some Jaylin propaganda about being a terrific offensive rebounder, or what's the situation there? Nobody. Okay. That's totally fine. So the thing we'll move on to then is in the second round, it's tough to just look at a player. And this kind of happened when I talked to Francis, and every guy he talked about had like this massive glaring flaw that you say it's kind of hard to, project him at the NBA level because he's so bad at this one thing. And that's what you're doing at the second round, is you're trying to pick the thing that will adjust, that will translate. And so I'm curious, we're going to go from Trey to Nabeel to Goose. What is the number one thing you're trying to, and not in a best player available sense, but when you're in the doldrums of the second round, what are you trying to make sure you hit on for sure? What are you really confident you can find that will translate?
I think, especially in this draft, someone that plays defense is probably the one thing that you can find. There's guys like Vince Williams that are probably going to get drafted low second round, is going to play 10 minutes for a team and provide good defense. Another thing I would say is generally passing. There's a lot of guys like, say, like a Dalen Terry that can't shoot at all, really, or to a degree, but provide some plus passing, and you could see in a half court setting where they're able to still be a plus because they have a plus skill.
Nabeel?
Yeah, I think in the second round, especially in the early second round where we just happen to be picking, I think it depends. Generally speaking, I like to look for NBA ready skill sets, but I think that also is a function of where you are as a team. I think where the Raptors are now, we're kind of like in this weird spot where we could sort of focus and go all in, or maybe if you're willing to take a shot on someone who has like high upside, maybe one of those distressed late first round prospects that sort of fell towards the early second round that you have an opportunity to take. I always say, or like for me, I think regardless, you should always at that stage try to take a swing and go for high upside. But of course, I think it's so dependent on the team and their needs, and I guess what phase and contention that they're in.
Is Houstan the upside for you? That's like the swing then, or is there a different guy?
If I had to go full swing, I think I'd go for someone like Josh Minott or something like that. Like just super, super raw wing, super, super young, showed ridiculous flashes as like a super athlete. And yeah, like you stick him in the G League for like 1 to 2 years and see where he's at and reevaluate from there.
We'll come back to Minott, but Goose, what are you trying to pick up in the second round?
I'm just looking for like any like outlier anything really, because I think in the second round there's usually a lot of guys that are like I think Francis talked about this too, where it's like you have like these generalists, but these generalists come and they don't really impact the game, and then it's just tough for them to get on the court and like develop if there's no if you're an NBA coach and you have a second rounder, you need to be able to point to him and say, okay, come in the game, do this for us, and then that's your like 10 minutes or whatever. So it's kind of tough for someone who doesn't have like an outlier skill set to just get the NBA minutes and develop from there.
I think Malcolm Miller is probably a good example of that. He did a lot of things at like an okay level, and everybody was waiting with bated breath to see the 3-point shot kind of sit around like probably 38% and upwards on decent volume, but it never did at the NBA level. So it just kind of, you're waiting on that outlier skill. Is there an outlier skill swing? Is it Wesley, or do you have other guys in mind as far as that?
All my guys are swings.
let's have the list then.
The guy that I think is really interesting to talk about is Patrick Baldwin Jr. And the outlier swing for him is just like being a 6'10" like shot maker, especially from the 3-point line. So he had a really bad season, which is why we can talk about him at 33rd, because he came in as like a top 5 prospect or whatever, and like similar to Jabari Smith, who is probably going to go number 1. His game is kind of that same sort of pitch where you have this like huge shooter with some fluidity and ability to create for himself. He had a really rough 11 games in college. He had an even worse combine where I think he has like the 3rd worst vertical ever. But that's the kind of guy you can look at and say, okay, yeah. I think that's the kind of guy you can look at and say, okay, well, there's still potential for you to impact an NBA game at a high level with a pretty valuable skill set, which is, like 3-point creation at like 6'10". And it's like, okay, well, we can swing on this guy, and since we're the Raptors, maybe we can figure out how to translate his talent to the NBA level.
That confused the hell out of me, man. I remember watching that. You guys, we were talking about it, and I was kind of freaking out, seeing his pull up and the weight transfer and the coordination. And I was like, how does this not translate to higher than a 26-inch vertical? Everybody here probably jumps at like 26 or higher. For an NBA player not to have a vertical higher than that, it blows my mind. But yeah, anyway, that is really intriguing. PBJ is really interesting. That's Francis told me to watch his film. He said that was the guy he wanted me to look into. So in the coming days, that's kind of what I'm going to do. Is there a swing for you, Trey?
I would say most of the guys I like are people I think are going to make the rotation and actually play, because the Raptors like opportunity costs, being not a small market team, but like people that doesn't attract free agents is like massive on missing picks. But if we were to swing, it would be Dominic Barlow from overtime. He didn't play the greatest comp, obviously. Like, it's kind of hard to assess even how good overtime is, basically. It's their first year. But he looks great at the combine. Like, a short thing on him is he's 6'9" with plus wingspan. He shot around 36% from 3, 76% from the free throw line. He's shown some ability to pass off the move. He's took the ball up and ran the offense at a few moments at the time. And he showed some ability to finish at the rim, especially at the combine. He made a lot of contact layups and was able to score. I look at him in the sense of he is probably won't make the rotation for 2 years. He's probably in the 905, but he could be a guy that's another connector on our team that could actually hit threes and defend multiple positions, which would be like a huge plus in like a playoff scenario.
That's a really interesting strategy. Is you could do the big swing guy for the 905 stash, and that kind of brings you maybe to the end of the Pascal Fred era, where perhaps the Raptors could be transitioning away from heavy, like the way that their usage hierarchy is dictated, or even, whoever's on the team at that point is pairing next to Scotty. So that is a really intriguing idea. Like a couple of you guys have mentioned, that put a guy on the 905, see what happens. That's, as far as timeline, I think that's a really unique way to kind of dance around it. And as you said, Trey, you don't want to miss on picks because you're not going to get good deals on free agents, really. unless I guess we'll see what happens. But the Raptors typically haven't been able to get those steals or anything like that. I mean, I thought Svi was, and now they're on the hook for his player option. What a strange contract that is. I've never seen a guy get a player option like that before. Minott. I'm curious if we can sit down with Minott, because Francis also seemed pretty intrigued with him. And how many of you, let's raise our hands, obviously Nabeel, but who's in on Minott and who considers him an intriguing prospect? Nabeel. Okay, Nabeel. Let's go back to Minott. I'm curious what you think about him, and why does he pique your interest?
Wow, this is the draft version of my Gary Trent Jr. takes. Just alone on an island. Minott's interesting. He's like 19, 20 years old. He's 6'8", 6'11" wingspan, although I think that's an unofficial reading because I don't think he measured at the combine. Apologies if he did.
Is that just from you looking really hard?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I eyeballed it, and I tried to look at other players standing next to him on the court. But yeah, he just has this unbelievable motor, and he is incredibly athletic. And combined with that, of course, all that translates into the Raptors' favorite skill, which is 6'8", 6'9" guys that can grab offensive rebounds and go for putbacks. So he definitely checks all those boxes. I think the biggest thing about him, though, is he has really interesting feel for the game, and he has like ridiculous court vision, like very unexpected, very like, wow, I didn't know he had eyes in the back of his head like that. He could make those reads, wraparounds, dump offs, cross courts. It's very interesting. I think, what you think about his handle and your mileage may vary, and also his shot definitely needs to be reworked. But I think even the stuff he showed as a role man and just being able to like make reads and his offensive rebound ability and his motor, there's just so much there. And some of the athleticism flashes are just so ridiculous that you're like, you know what? I look at the Raptors and their penchant and their track record for being able to develop guys' shooting and develop guys' handle into at least, making a functional one. Because while I do think Minott's not a plus ball handler by any means, but he does have, some wiggle when he's catching off the fly and he's attacking closeouts and stuff. And, at least he has that as a foundation. And I just think with all that youth, all that athleticism, all those special tools, I just think it's like a wild upside gamble. And that's why I'm in. I'm just so intrigued to see where he ends up and if he develops at all. Just a really, really interesting prospect.
It's athleticism meets motor. I think will always really, and then when they hit, everybody's like, how could we have possibly missed this guy? Because it's all about how you implement yourself at the NBA level, which is, the whole deal. I'm curious, is there, we've talked about Jaylin, but as far as like bigs, there's like Koloko, there's, I guess, Kessler, which I know people are lower on. There's Kamagate. Are you guys leaning, like we did talk about Jaylin, yes, but are you guys leaning towards expecting a wing picked in this draft? Are you expecting a guard? Like if you had to put on the hat of like, what is it, Clairvoyant Bill from the Grantland days, and you had to try and guess what the Raptors do you have any expectations? And we'll start with you, Goose.
I think it would be a wing or a big. I would be kind of surprised if they took a guard, because this is not.
Eric Flynn is throwing a fit if they pick a
guard.
Well,
he would, he would be happy if they don't. Well, yeah. But yeah, I don't think this is a good draft for guards, especially ones that kind of fit the Raptors play style. Like they brought in Nembhard, Andrew Nembhard from Gonzaga for a workout, but Nick Nurse knows him from the Team Canada stuff. But he would have similar issues as Malachi does on the roster in terms of like when your team does kind of bad at pick and roll, it kind of limits the amount of guards that you can bring in and have them like be effective players for you.
Trey, do you have any clairvoyant Trey?
I would say they're probably going to pick a wing as well. Like Goose said, it's a pretty bad guard draft. And in general, we have I know Scotty and Pascal could be considered like wing type players, but we have no designated wings on the team. Utah's probably supposed to do that thing. and he didn't really hit his shots. We need to maintain like this vision. We need plus size that actually can shoot and provide spacing there. There's a few guys that can do that, like Christian Braun, Barlow to a degree, that can provide that spacing, and like Nabeel said, a Cam Johnson type of role where we maintain our defensive versatility and ability to switch everything, but still add some plus shooting to the situation that we have.
You brought up a really interesting thing, and Cam Johnson was picked way higher than people expected because he was quite old coming out of the draft. And is there an older player in the draft who you guys perceive as like, that guy's going to be a leaguer? You know, like he'll be. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Trey. Who do you have on? Who do you have in mind?
Alondes Williams. If he was not an old man, he would be a top 15 pick, in my opinion.
So what's the sell on Alondes?
Very good athlete, gets to the rim at will. He can finish at the rim. He's a very, very good passer. The swing skill that's going to be for him that probably determines if he's going to be a starter or not is his shooting. And if he can figure that out, I think he's going to be a huge plus. I know like teams like the Warriors have worked out with him who struggle with rim pressure. If he's actually able to like use that athleticism, or like even in a maxi sort of state, work off of another perimeter player and attack tilts, he's going to be able to have impact off the bench.
Anybody else have some surefire guys that you think like maybe they're not worth the swing to you? You want to aim higher, but you think that they're gonna stick?
I don't have a surefire guy, but just to riff off what Goose said, I'd love to see us draft Nembhard, only to see Eric Flynn's impending Facebook post and just rage and disappointment. But no, yeah, I like Alondes Williams quite a bit. I think that'd be I'd love to get a guy like him. You know, just that scoring upside, and I think he's like a bucket getter from day one in the league. You know, and I echo the sentiments of Goose as well. I only wanted to mention that in terms of what I think we're gonna do, Dominic Barlow and Kofi Coburn are repped by Pascal's agent. Like they're all under that same agency. So
you always know the agents. Listen, you always know the trainers, man.
Follow them, man. You'd be surprised. You'd be very, very surprised. I'm telling you, it happens, man. Someone, you know, sign my guy. I'll make sure I'll be reasonable in my other players, you know, contract negotiations when time comes up. I'm telling you, it happens. No, that's my conspiracy bill take, not clairvoyant bill.
Right.
I'm bringing that up. But no, yeah, I think yeah, I don't know. Kofi Coburn's interesting. Not a fan, but like I would not be shocked if he ends up being like an undrafted guy in camp or something like that. Kessler Edwards, who you mentioned, is interesting because I think the Raptors sent like scouts to like 5-6 Auburn games this year, from what I read, and I find that very, very interesting. I do.
Maybe they were going to the wrong Jaylin Williams game.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
My question is, sorry, Nabeel, but I'm curious about like Goose. You brought up Nembhard and how he would maybe be like a tough fit on the Raptors. Just if anybody has an expectation of a player that you like a lot, but you think would actually be a poor fit for the Raptors, like you think, oh yeah, that's probably not going to go so well. And then maybe a player who you think that their limitations would be papered over, a la Delano Banton, and the stronger parts of their game would be allowed to flourish. If we're talking about fit specifically, not best player available, who do we think about really great fits and really poor fits?
Great fit, I would probably say Jake LaRavia from Wake Forest. Fits what the Raptors do. Long, can play the 3 or the 4. Hit some shots to agree, and he's actually a really good cutter. Him and Alondes were able to work really well off each other and finish. And if we do lose Boucher, we're probably losing the one real downhill threat that we have off of Pascal mid post action, and he could fit a lot of what Boucher was doing. Poor fits that I think are still going to be good is probably Dalen Terry. Dalen Terry's a really good defender. He can't really shoot currently. I know there's some upside with the catch and shoot numbers that he had, but it's only like 60 attempts. He basically does a lot of what Delano already does, maybe a bit more athleticism, where he can really work well in transition, pass the ball, get downhill at times and turn the corner. But I don't think he necessarily fits what we need as a wing in terms of adding some extra spacing, or could actually run like a second unit and fill that backup point guard position.
Mm-hmm. Those guys are always tough fits because that's kind of like where the Delon Wright comes into it, right? Is you're not getting that plus volume, but you're getting plus ball handling, but not at the level where you would want to take the ball out of better ball handlers. And it's also tough to fit him into those lineups. And then obviously the plus defense as well is interesting. I know Delano and Delon have a few people who kind of comp them as far as maybe outcome. Does anybody else have any fits or great fits / bad fits that they like?
I have a question with the fits. Do you consider it a bad fit if they're like a bad defender? And you're like, okay, well, this guy he can contribute on offense, but Nick Nurse will never play him. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I would consider. I don't want to echo the dogma of the fan base too much here and like say like Donovan Mitchell can't be our 9th man or something like that.
No.
But I do think they have to be quite like a very strong offensive presence to kind of offset any downside on defense. I think that's probably. Does anybody else have qualms with that? Is that kind of how you would answer that too?
Yeah, I would say the same. We've seen it a few times. Armani Brooks did have some run, but at any time where he got killed in back-to-back possessions, Nick Nurse sat him down immediately, even though like he at times was maybe one of 3 spacers on our team.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. Is that when Gary was shooting, was it 29% and Fred was shooting like 27% from 3 post All-Star break? Nick wasn't like, no, we're not bringing the shooters in. Like, Pascal, you're going to grind, see what we get. Yeah, that makes sense too. Nabeel or Goose, actually, just go back. Like, with these new considerations, what are your thoughts?
I think the last guy I can remember who was mostly bad at defense and Nick like kept a long leash on him was Terrence Davis. I think
that?
That's what you.
No, I'm just kidding.
Redacted. Sorry. Terrence Davis would be kind of the outcome I guess you're hoping for in terms of, well, his defense isn't great, but he tries, and then Nick trusts him to do stuff on offense. I don't know. Delano wasn't the greatest defender this year either, but he didn't get that much playing time, so it's kind of iffy.
Yeah,
which is why I was curious what you guys thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nabeel, do you have any fit takes? It's okay if you don't.
I thought Goose has made the most sense, and that's what resonated with me with Nembhard. I think he's best. I actually really like Nembhard. I'm fairly high on Nembhard myself, but I agree. I think he'd function best in an offense that has high pick and roll usage, so he can make all those reads and really operate out of that. And the Raptors obviously don't have that, or don't run that as much as some of the other teams in the league. So I think that would be a bad fit, but I don't necessarily. In fact, I actually think he's quite a good player. I really like him a lot. I think I was thinking about this actually. Older guys don't have the greatest tools, aren't that athletic. And while he does have good size, doesn't have any sort of ability or outlier sort of attribute that would allow him to be like a plus finisher at the rim, especially at the NBA level. And I was thinking of guys like Malachi Flynn, Jalen Brunson and stuff, and he is bigger than both of those guys, height wise, wingspan wise, and I think he's also a better passer than both of them to a certain degree. I think Malachi was much more of like a pull up type of point guard at the college level, especially when he was at San Diego State. And Brunson, obviously a very decorated college player and turned out to be an excellent NBA player. But I think Nembhard, he's got a mid-range and a floater game. I think that's quite underrated, and I think that is what sort of sets him apart from the Malachi Flynn's of the world of guards who can't really get to the rim. And yeah, I think he's shown a willingness to be a catch and shoot guy too. So he does have potential, even though that release is a little low, but he does have the potential to be an off-ball guy as well. But yeah, I think any team that gets him, that runs a ton of pick and roll, I think we'll get like a really, really high end backup guard at the very least, I think, in the league by taking him.
Okay. I think we're in the final throes of the podcast, and that brings us to the final aspect of it. Between Wesley, Williams, and Houstan, everybody's number one pick. Everybody take your guy and try and convince me why he should be selected over the other two. And I guess we'll start with Trey first.
Okay. My guy's actually going to play.
Shit. You said it.
Jaylin Williams allows us to play drop, which I think is really important. The last few championship teams have been all drop based. He's passing bigs, really helping a half court scenario. We're seeing it in these finals. It's very difficult to get to the rim. So a big that actually can get downhill and pass, maybe hit a push shot as well, adding maybe 8 to 10 points is a big difference in a series. And we're getting someone that probably won't miss as a pick. He's going to provide some value. He's going to be at worst a backup big for us. And lastly, there is some upside as a shooter. The Raptors have Precious Achiuwa shot 36% last year, so there is some upside because he has really good touch around the rim. And if he's able to shoot and maybe even expand it further out from there from mid range, I think he could be a starter in the league. Like, I personally think he's a top 20 player, but he's going to go in the second round.
That's a good sell. Goose, Wesley, what's the deal?
When you have a guy that has plus athletic tools, the ability to score at all three levels, is a good defender, and is a positive playmaker, I think that's a really valuable player to have. And I think Wesley has all those parts to this game. So it's just about coming to the Raptors and putting it together. And like I mentioned before, he was pretty impressive to me defensively. Like, his stats aren't great, but like, he's very disciplined and he's like always engaged on that end, which is kind of rare for like a scorer type. So I think he would also play for the Raptors. So my pitch is that he has a bit more of an exciting upside than the other two. And he's a bit more, fills more of a need, I guess, than the other two with his rim pressure and his ability to eventually shoot and like punch gaps and maybe make some plays out of pick and roll and stuff. So yeah, that's my pitch.
That's a good one. The Raptors, one of the most, well, it's kind of funny because Trey brought up, getting to the rim via good interior passing from a big man, like this release valve that you toss it into and start running actions off of, which is, the Raptors found success with Thad at times to kind of outskirt what Embiid was doing, just parked in the paint. But then you're providing the other answer that they weren't able to call upon in their series, which is they swing the ball, they go like side, top, side. Is that guy a shooter? Can he get all the way to the rim? And if it wasn't OG or Precious, the answer was no. And one of those guys is your big. So that makes it having like Wesley there, maybe puts the ball on the ground, maybe gets all the way. That's really interesting too. Nabeel, Houstan, what's the pitch? What's the sell?
Size and shooting, baby. Size and shooting. That's the bet. Today's NBA, size and shooting goes a long way. Couple that with his youth, all the flashes and potential he's shown in high school, internationally, and in college to be able to, develop some off the dribble stuff. So it's more a consistent part of his game. Some secondary playmaking chops as well, which would, sort of address the question we had earlier in the pod about, movement shooters in today's NBA, especially in the playoffs, their ability to get schemed, off the floor and become ineffective, especially if they're not, good individual defenders. I also, believe in Caleb Houstan's, team defense and his positional defense, even though I think he might struggle in, Nurse's system at first, but, I feel fairly confident that he'd be able to get caught up to speed. And then just all the sort of brand equity and pedigree he has. He was a top 10 guy in his class, in his high school recruiting class, did well, on the international circuit. So I think, and obviously in high school as well, he put on a stacked team and thrived. So, all those, factors, contributing would sort of sell Caleb Houstan as the pick.
I didn't expect brand equity to make it in the podcast, but you brought it in. Yeah, we did it. There's like, the streamers start coming down like, poof, it's like, yes. before we get out of here, everybody, you get a chance. If you think there's somebody we didn't get to cover properly, or just a name you want to throw out there, so that if the Raptors do end up drafting them, we can clip this and say you're a genius. We'll start with Nabeel. I guess finishing thoughts on this year's draft, and maybe some guys you find interesting or that we didn't talk about enough.
Yeah, there's one guy we didn't talk about. I think he's going to submit his name last second. Samson Folk, potential prospect. Would love to grab him for the Raps.
Yeah.
I've seen that guy hoop. No,
not getting a second contract, unfortunately.
I think this draft is relatively weak. Especially compared to prior years, and especially compared to the most recent draft class we had. But I think with this draft, what I'm finding just reading stuff and listening to you guys and consuming all the content around it is I think there's definitely value to be found. There's a lot of guys that people really, really love and sort of like, quote unquote, it's their guy, and they're really hitching their wagon to them, and there's a lot of thoughtful analysis on specific guys, like the Jaylin Williams, who else, Dominic Barlow has been getting some, buzz, especially, on the back end of people who kind of want like that speculative upside pick. Ryan Rollins, David Roddy, all guys that are sought to go in the second round, even Trevor Keels, Jaylin Williams, the one from Santa Clara as well, not the big man, Jaylin Williams. So I think, despite it being a weaker draft class, I think, there's a lot of interesting guys that I'm intrigued by that I think could carve out NBA careers, but may not have, the upside as your Brandon Bostons of last year or something like that, like one of those second round guys with youth and upside.
Well put. Goose, what's any final thoughts?
Yeah, I did want to bring up Bryce McGowan's because I am a fan of his game, and I think that he'd be really interesting. But like I mentioned before with the defense, I find it hard to look at him and say like, oh, that's the guy the Raptors would draft, because he's a hooper that doesn't defend. But I think if you're looking at him in terms of like a project where you have this 6'7" athletic wing who can be like a 3-level scorer, I think you can mold him to be like a really great complement to what Scotty and Pascal are able to create. So that would be my pitch for McGowan's, is just drafting him with all of his offense in mind and just molding the rest of his game to really fit a guy that would help the Raptors.
Yeah, great. Bryce McGowan. I know, as you're saying to me, Lewis is infatuated with McGowan's. I know quite a few people who are. I guess the draft is coming up in like 9 days at this point. Yeah. Well, I guess by the time this podcast comes out, there might not be that much time, but I'll probably end up talking McGowan's with somebody else at some point. But yeah, good call out. Trey, final thoughts, brother.
I think someone that we haven't talked about is probably Wendell Moore. I could see the Raptors drafting him as well. He's a plus defender. He knows how to play his role. There's some shooting upside as well. I could see one day him being one of the guys in the second round that become a starter on a team, because he does everything right. He is a generalist. There isn't any plus or any outlier skill like Goose loves, but he is able to impact the game. He defends at a decent level, shows some passing ability, and is a good finisher, especially in transition. So I do think he's one of those guys in like a Justin Champagnie situation where he does everything well, so he finds himself on the court probably immediately as a rookie, and then develops from there to add maybe like high-level shooting and becomes a starter down the road.
Very, very interesting. Before we get out of here, the listeners, unfortunately, fellas, I don't want to give 3 different plug sections, so I'm going to do all you guys at once. So if you liked what Trey said, you can find him on Twitter at Heath_check. Heath is spelled the same as you can see on screen. If you're a listener, HEATH. If you're trying to follow Goose, that is at Hoop Goose. Yes, the gaggle will grow after the podcast, hopefully. And if you like what Nabeel was talking about, at Pack Attack, PAKHATTAK. And all these guys can be found musing online about basketball, the draft, the NBA, all that kind of stuff. And I want to thank every single one of you for hopping on. This is the first podcast I've done like this, and I think it went swimmingly. And that is mostly because of the professionalism and the insights that you fellas brought here. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Always happy to be on with the fellas. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was tape.
Yeah. So listener, viewer, whichever it is, thanks for tuning in. We're gonna get out of here. So take care.